Riverside Mall looked like the safest place in the city. From the outside, its wide glass entrance reflected sunlight during the day and warm golden lights at night. Families walked in holding shopping bags. Teenagers laughed near the cinema entrance, and the smell of coffee and fresh food filled the air from morning until closing time. It was the kind of place where people felt comfortable staying for hours without thinking twice about their safety. Nothing about Riverside Mall suggested that anything was wrong. For years, it had been the busiest shopping center in the region. On weekends, the parking lot overflowed. During holidays, crowds stretched from one end of the building to the other. Workers joked that the mall never truly slept because even after the last store closed, cleaning crews and security guards took over the quiet night shift. That routine had continued peacefully for years, until the smell appeared. It started quietly, almost too small to notice. A young employee working in the back storage room of a clothing store mentioned it first. She told her manager that something smelled strange near the supply corridor behind the shops. At first, the manager assumed it was leftover food or a blocked drain. The mall had dozens of restaurants and food stalls, and smells traveled easily through ventilation systems. But the next day, another employee from a different store complained about the same thing. Within a week, several workers were talking about it in the break room. They described it differently. Some said it smelled damp, like wet cardboard that had been forgotten for too long. Others said it smelled sour, almost metallic. A few workers insisted it smelled like old garbage hidden somewhere behind the walls. The strange part was that the smell never stayed in one place. Some days it appeared near the electronics stores. Other days it drifted near the service hallways behind the food court. It never reached the main shopping areas strongly enough for customers to notice, but employees working in back corridors couldn't ignore it anymore. Mall management called the cleaning team to investigate. Workers searched every trash room and dumpster area. They cleaned drains and checked storage closets. Air vents were opened and inspected. The mall even hired a plumbing company to search for leaks or broken pipes. They found nothing. Still, the smell returned. At first it came once every few days, then every day, then multiple times a day. It always appeared in the same hidden hallways used only by employees. It never reached the bright public areas filled with shoppers and music. It was as if something behind the walls was slowly spreading. Employees began to whisper about it. Some joked that an animal had crawled into the walls and died. Others laughed nervously and blamed old building pipes. But even the jokes sounded forced. The smell didn't behave like anything normal. Then the noises began. The first person to report the sounds was a night cleaner named Farah. She worked long shifts after the mall closed, pushing a cart through the silent corridors. One night, while mopping the floor near a locked storage hallway, she heard a soft metallic clank echo from somewhere below her feet. She froze, listening. The sound came again. A faint scraping noise, like metal dragging slowly against concrete. Farah stood still for almost a minute, trying to decide what she had heard. Finally, she convinced herself it was the building settling. Old pipes often made strange noises at night when everything became quiet. Still, she avoided that hallway for the rest of her shift. A few days later, another cleaner heard something similar. Then a maintenance worker reported a faint banging sound coming from beneath a floor panel. Each person assumed it had a simple explanation, but the reports kept coming. Eventually, the stories reached the night security team. Night security at Riverside Mall was quiet work. After midnight, the huge building turned silent and empty. The bright music stopped, the crowds disappeared, and long hallways stretched into darkness. Security guards spent their shifts walking slow patrol routes, checking locked doors and watching camera screens. One of those guards was Imran. Imran had worked night security for almost 3 years. He was calm, observant, and known for taking his job seriously. He walked the same routes every night and knew every corridor, every emergency exit, and every storage door. When he first heard about the smell and the strange noises, he didn't think much of it. Buildings made sounds. Old ventilation systems pushed air through long tunnels. Rats sometimes found their way into large structures. But after a few weeks, even Imran began to notice something strange. The smell always appeared strongest during the night shift. When the mall closed and the crowds left, the air felt different. Still, heavy, quiet enough that even small sounds echoed through the corridors. One night, while walking past the service hallway behind the food court, Imran caught a strong wave of the smell. He stopped and shined his flashlight along the walls and ceiling. Everything looked normal. Clean floors, painted walls, locked storage doors. Yet the smell lingered. He reported it to management, but like the others, he was told it was probably plumbing or ventilation. A week later, during another shift, he heard something that made him stop walking. A faint thump. He turned his flashlight toward the floor. Silence returned. Imran waited, listening carefully. Then he heard it again. A soft movement, almost like a footstep, coming from beneath the ground. His heart began to beat faster. He crouched down and pressed his hand against the floor tiles. The surface felt cold and solid. He told himself he was imagining things. Maybe it was a pipe expanding or contracting. But deep down, he knew what footsteps sounded like. He finished his patrol, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next few nights, he paid closer attention to every sound. Most shifts passed quietly. Sometimes he heard distant echoes that could easily be explained. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just after 2 a.m. The mall had been closed for hours. The lights were dimmed, and the building felt empty and still. Imran was walking through a long service corridor behind a row of clothing stores. His footsteps echoed softly as he moved. The smell was strong that night, stronger than he had ever noticed before. He slowed his pace. That was when he heard it. Running. Clear, fast footsteps. From beneath the floor. Imran froze in the middle of the hallway, gripping his flashlight tightly. The sound moved quickly under the tiles, like someone sprinting through a tunnel below him. Then it stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise itself. Imran stood there for a long moment, staring at the floor. Someone was moving under the mall. After the night Imran heard the running footsteps beneath the corridor floor, he stopped seeing the mall the same way. Every hallway felt different. Every quiet corner felt suspicious. He had worked in the building for years, and believed he understood its layout completely. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was walking through a place that was hiding something from him. The next morning he filed an incident report. He wrote everything carefully and clearly, describing the footsteps, the smell, and the exact location where he had heard the sound. His supervisor read the report twice and sighed. Strange noises in large buildings were common, especially at night. The official explanation remained the same. Pipes, ventilation, old construction. But Imran noticed something new after that report. No one laughed at him. Instead, the supervisor quietly asked him to keep an eye on the area during his future patrols. For the next several nights, Imran paid closer attention to every small detail. He slowed down near the hallway where the sounds had come from. He stopped and listened more often. Most nights were silent, still and empty, almost peaceful. Then, 5 nights later, the sound returned. It was just after midnight this time. He was walking past the electronics store corridor when he heard a faint metallic tap echo beneath his feet. It sounded distant, but real, like someone accidentally knocking against a pipe or wall underground. Imran immediately crouched down and pressed his ear to the cold tile floor. For several seconds there was nothing. Then a soft scraping noise traveled through the ground. His chest tightened. The sound was too clear to be imagination, too controlled to be random building noise. Someone was moving down there. He reported the incident again, and this time management decided to check the area more seriously. The next evening, before the mall closed, a small maintenance team arrived with tools and building maps. They searched the hallway, examining the floor panels and nearby storage rooms. That was when they discovered something unusual. At the very end of the corridor, partially hidden behind stacked supply boxes, stood an old storage door that most employees had never noticed. It was painted the same dull color as the walls and had been covered in so many layers of paint that its edges almost blended into the surface around it. Without looking carefully, it appeared to be part of the wall itself. The maintenance supervisor stared at it for a long moment. He flipped through the updated building map in his hands and frowned. The door was not on the map. At first, everyone assumed the map was outdated. The mall had been renovated many times over the years. Walls had been moved. New stores had replaced old ones. Entire sections had been redesigned. It was possible that the door belonged to an old storage area that was simply no longer in use. But something about it felt wrong. The lock was rusted, yet the door itself didn't look completely abandoned. The paint around the handle was slightly scratched, as if it had been touched more recently than the rest of the surface. Imran felt a quiet unease settle in his chest as he stared at the door. The smell was strongest here. Management decided not to open the door immediately. They scheduled a proper inspection for the following night, after the mall closed. Police would be present, just in case. It was supposed to be a routine safety check. Still, the hours leading up to the inspection felt unusually tense. The next night, shortly after closing, the corridor was cleared of all employees. The bright store lights shut off, leaving only the dim overhead lights glowing in the service hallway. The silence returned, deeper than usual, as if the building itself was holding its breath. 2 police officers arrived along with the maintenance team and the mall supervisor. Imran stood nearby, watching the group gather around the hidden door. Up close, it looked even stranger. The rust on the lock suggested years of neglect, yet the door didn't look damaged or warped like something forgotten for decades. It stood straight and solid, quietly waiting. The maintenance supervisor inserted a key and tried turning the lock. It didn't move. He tried again with more force. The metal groaned loudly, echoing down the corridor. After a long moment, the lock finally snapped open with a sharp cracking sound that made everyone flinch. No one spoke. The supervisor slowly pulled the handle. The door opened only a few inches before stopping against something heavy on the other side. He pushed harder, and the door creaked open enough to reveal darkness beyond. A cold draft rushed out from the opening. It carried the smell with it, stronger than ever before. Damp, stale, unfamiliar. One of the officers switched on his flashlight and aimed it through the gap. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. The beam of light revealed concrete steps covered in dust, disappearing into a space that seemed to stretch far below them all. The air felt colder as it drifted upward, brushing against their faces. No one had expected a staircase. The maintenance supervisor whispered that it must be an old service access point from the original construction. Large buildings often had underground utility corridors used for wiring and pipes. Many of them were sealed during renovations and forgotten over time. Still, the staircase didn't look abandoned. The dust on the steps was disturbed in places, forming faint smudges that looked like footprints. One of the officers exchanged a glance with the other. Without saying a word, they both switched on their flashlights and stepped forward. The group moved slowly down the staircase. Each step echoed softly in the narrow concrete space. The air grew colder and heavier as they descended. The smell became stronger with every step, clinging to the back of their throats. At the bottom of the stairs, the officers paused. Before them stretched a long underground corridor lined with pipes and cables running along the ceiling. The walls were bare concrete, slightly damp in places. The beam of the flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a tunnel that extended far beyond the reach of the light. The maintenance supervisor whispered that these tunnels were likely part of the original infrastructure. Old wiring channels, water pipes, maintenance access routes, places no one had visited in years. Yet something about the corridor felt wrong. The silence was too complete. Then the officers noticed the wires. Thin electrical cables had been tied neatly along one wall, separate from the original wiring. They looked newer, cleaner, carefully installed. Someone had been here. The group moved forward slowly, their footsteps echoing in the underground tunnel. The sound bounced off the walls and returned to them in soft, distant echoes. After several meters, the beam of a flashlight revealed something unexpected. A plastic chair sat against the wall. It looked ordinary and out of place at the same time. A simple white chair, the kind used in cheap offices or outdoor patios. Dust gathered around its legs, but the seat itself looked clean. The officer closest to it stopped walking. No one spoke, but everyone understood the same thought at the same time. This place wasn't empty. They continued deeper into the corridor. A few steps later, they saw the mattress. It lay in a small corner space between pipes, covered with blankets folded carefully on top. Nearby stood a stack of plastic containers filled with bottled water and canned food. The maintenance supervisor took a slow step backward. This was no abandoned tunnel. Someone had built a living space underground. The officers raised their flashlights and scanned the darkness ahead, their expressions tense and focused. Somewhere in the silent tunnel, a faint metallic sound echoed, and for the first time, everyone realized they might not be alone down there. The metallic sound echoed softly through the tunnel, bouncing off the concrete walls before fading into silence. Every person standing in the corridor froze at the same time. The officers lifted their flashlights higher, beams cutting through the darkness as their breathing became louder in the quiet space. No one spoke for several seconds. The tunnel stretched ahead in a straight line, disappearing into shadow. Pipes ran along the ceiling like metal veins, dripping faint drops of water that tapped against the floor. The air felt stale, unmoving, as if it had been trapped underground for years. The officer in front slowly raised his hand, signaling everyone to stay quiet. They listened. Nothing moved. Only the faint hum of distant electricity vibrated through the walls. After a long moment, the officers began walking forward again, their steps slower now, more careful. Every sound they made echoed loudly, making the tunnel feel even emptier than before. The mattress and plastic chair had already changed the mood of the search. Those objects were not random. They were arranged neatly, placed with purpose. Whoever had been here did not live in chaos. They had built something organized. The beam of one flashlight moved along the wall and stopped. A cable ran from the ceiling down into a small plastic box mounted on the concrete. The box hummed softly, glowing with a tiny green light. It was connected to wires that disappeared deeper into the tunnel. One of the officers leaned closer and whispered that it looked like a power converter. Someone underground had electricity. The realization made the tunnel feel smaller and more threatening. This was not someone hiding for a night or two. This was someone who had built a system. Someone who planned to stay. The group moved deeper into the corridor, following the cables along the wall. After several meters, the tunnel widened into a larger space that had once been a storage room. The change was sudden and shocking. The room looked like a hidden apartment. Shelves had been built using wooden boards balanced on stacked bricks. Plastic containers were arranged carefully along the shelves. Boxes of canned food were stacked in neat rows. Bottles of water filled an entire corner of the room. A small camping stove sat on a metal table. Next to it were cooking pots, a knife, and a pile of neatly folded cloths. The room smelled faintly of gas and soap. It looked clean. Too clean. The officers moved slowly through the space, their flashlights scanning every corner. The neatness of the room made it feel even more disturbing. Nothing was messy. Nothing looked rushed or temporary. Whoever lived here had taken care of this place. A blanket hung across one wall like a curtain. One officer gently pulled it aside and revealed a narrow sleeping area behind it. A mattress lay on the floor, covered with lead blankets and a pillow that looked recently used. Beside the mattress sat a small stack of books. The officer crouched and picked one up. It was a novel from the mall bookstore upstairs. The price sticker was still attached. None of the items in the room had receipts or packaging. The realization spread quietly through the group. Everything here had been taken from the mall. The food, the books, the supplies. Even the plastic containers matched products sold in the supermarket upstairs. Someone had been stealing small items for years without being noticed. The group continued searching the room carefully. One officer opened a storage box and found batteries stacked inside. Another discovered folded clothing sorted by color. Everything was arranged with quiet precision. Then the maintenance supervisor gasped softly. In the far corner of the room stood a small desk made from wooden boards. On top of it sat 3 computer monitors glowing faintly in the dark. They were still on. The screens displayed live security camera feeds from the mall above. The officers stared in disbelief. The first screen showed the main entrance. The second showed the food court. The third displayed a hallway near the cinema. People were walking through the mall in real time. Someone underground had been watching the mall every day. The officer closest to the desk leaned forward slowly. A keyboard sat in front of the screens. The keys looked worn from frequent use. Beside the keyboard lay a notebook filled with handwritten notes. The officer opened it. Dates filled the pages, written in neat, careful handwriting. Each day had short comments beside it. Crowded day. Holiday sales starting. New guard on night shift. Police visit upstairs. Camera repaired near entrance. The entries stretched back page after page, month after month, year after year. The officer flipped to the first page. The date at the top was 4 years old. Silence filled the underground room as the truth settled over everyone at once. Someone had lived beneath the mall for 4 years, watching everything, learning everything, recording everything. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. This discovery changed the situation completely. This was no longer just trespassing or theft. Someone had secretly observed thousands of people without their knowledge. The search continued deeper into the underground space. Behind the desk, another narrow tunnel extended further into the darkness. It was smaller than the main corridor, barely wide enough for one person to walk comfortably. The group moved slowly into the tunnel, following the beam of their flashlights. After several meters, they reached another hidden room. This one felt colder. And stranger, the walls were covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. They were pinned in rows across the concrete surface, forming a silent gallery of faces. Men, women, children, employees in uniforms, security guards standing at their posts, families eating in the food court, teenagers laughing near the cinema entrance. Every photograph had been taken secretly. The angle of the images made it clear they were captured from hidden positions, from behind vents, from high corners, from places no one would think to look. The officer closest to the wall felt his stomach tighten. These people had never known they were being watched. Some of the photos were labeled with small notes written underneath. Regular visitor. Works at clothing store. Arrives every Saturday. Closes shop at 10 p.m. The handwriting matched the notebook on the desk. The room felt heavier with every step they took inside it. The photographs created the unsettling feeling that the underground resident knew the mall better than anyone above it. At the center of the wall hung a calendar. It was old and slightly torn, the paper curling at the edges. Each day was filled with small notes written in the same careful handwriting as the notebook. Busy weekend. Security inspection. Holiday decorations installed. Rainy day. Fewer visitors. The entry stopped 3 days ago. The officer lowered his flashlight slowly. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. The realization spread through the room like a cold wave. This hidden apartment was not abandoned. Its owner had left only days ago. And they had left in a hurry. The officers searched the room again, now moving faster. They opened containers, checked corners, and examined every surface for clues. But the space held no obvious identity. No name. No ID. No personal photographs. Whoever lived here had erased their identity carefully. The only thing they had left behind was evidence that they had been watching the world above them. As the officers prepared to leave the underground apartment, a quiet thought settled into everyone's mind. For 4 years, thousands of people had walked through Riverside Mall, laughing, shopping, and living their lives. And beneath their feet, someone had been silently watching it all. The discovery of the underground apartment changed everything about the investigation. What began as a strange smell and mysterious noises had turned into a case that felt far more disturbing than anyone expected. The idea that someone had secretly lived beneath a crowded shopping mall for years was unsettling enough, but the cameras and photographs made the situation far more serious. Whoever this person was, they had spent years studying the daily lives of strangers without ever being noticed. The mall closed for 2 days while investigators searched every part of the building. Police teams moved through hallways, storage rooms, rooftops, and parking areas. Every locked door was opened. Every maintenance tunnel was inspected. Officers searched for hidden entrances, escape routes, or anything that could explain how someone had managed to live underground for so long without being caught. But the underground apartment was empty. Whoever had lived there had disappeared. The only clues left behind were the notebook, the calendar, and the hundreds of photographs. Investigators gathered everything carefully and brought the items to the police station. The search had now shifted from finding a hidden room to finding the person who built it. The first step was the cameras. The underground monitors had been connected to the mall's security network. That meant the person underground had found a way to access the building's surveillance system. The technical team worked for hours tracing the cables and analyzing the connection points. Eventually, they discovered the person had tapped into the system during an old renovation project several years earlier. A section of wiring had been left exposed behind a wall that was later sealed. It had created a hidden access point that no one knew existed. Whoever lived underground knew the building extremely well. Investigators began reviewing old employment records from the mall's renovation period. Hundreds of workers had been hired during those years. Construction crews, electricians, plumbers, engineers, and maintenance staff had all passed through the building. The list was long and complicated. At the same time, detectives began analyzing the photographs found in the hidden room. They spread the pictures across large tables and studied them carefully. The photos showed people from every part of the mall, but some individuals appeared again and again. Security guards, store managers, cleaning staff, workers who followed predictable routines. The person underground had been studying patterns. The notebook confirmed it. The daily entries described crowd levels, security shifts, and even police visits. It read like a diary written by someone who watched life from a distance. Days turned into nights as investigators searched through hours of security footage from previous years. The mall had cameras covering almost every public area. If the person had been stealing supplies or moving through the building, there had to be footage somewhere. The problem was the sheer amount of video. Thousands of hours recorded every week. It was like searching for a single face in an ocean of strangers. Then a detective named Sarah noticed something unusual. While reviewing footage from the past year, she saw a man wearing a plain gray hoodie walking through the mall. At first he seemed completely normal. He walked slowly past store windows, paused near the food court, and then disappeared toward an exit. Nothing about him seemed suspicious, except she had seen him before. Sarah searched older footage and found the same man again. Same gray hoodie, same slow walk, same quiet behavior. He appeared once every few days, always alone, always watching, never shopping. The discovery caught the attention of the entire investigation team. They began searching for the man in footage from earlier years. Slowly, piece by piece, the timeline formed. The man had been appearing in the mall for 4 years. He was always dressed simply. No bright colors. No noticeable accessories. Nothing that would make him stand out in a crowd. He blended perfectly with the flow of shoppers. Sometimes he sat on a bench for hours. Sometimes he walked the same hallway repeatedly. Sometimes he stood near the main entrance, watching people come and go. He never spoke to anyone. He never bought anything. He simply observed. Facial recognition software was used to scan the footage. The process took hours, then days. Finally, a match appeared in a missing persons database. The name attached to the face was Daniel Hart. Daniel had once worked as a maintenance technician during the mall's renovation 5 years earlier. According to employment records, he had been part of the team responsible for wiring and utility access. He knew the building's hidden spaces. He knew the tunnels. He knew the walls. Investigators contacted Daniel's last known family member, his sister. She confirmed that Daniel had disappeared 4 years ago. At the time, he had been struggling after losing his job. He stopped answering calls, stopped visiting, and eventually stopped using his bank account. The family had reported him missing, but no leads had ever been found. Until now, the realization spread quickly through the investigation team. Daniel hadn't vanished from the city. He had simply moved underground. Armed with a name and a face, police returned to the mall. Officers searched the tunnels again, this time hoping to find any clue Daniel might have left behind. They examined every corner of the underground apartment, looking for fingerprints or hidden documents. But Daniel had been careful. There were no IDs, no personal photos, no letters, no clear sign of his identity. It was as if he had erased himself completely. Police released Daniel's photo to the public and asked for information. News stations picked up the story immediately. Headlines described the mystery man who had secretly lived under a mall for years. The public reaction was intense. Some people were frightened. Others were fascinated. Many could not believe that someone could live so close to thousands of people without ever being noticed. Tips began pouring in from across the city. People reported possible sightings. Someone claimed to have seen him on a bus. Another believed they spotted him near a park. Police followed every lead carefully. None of them were confirmed. Days passed without progress. The underground apartment remained empty and silent. The tunnels felt colder than before. The cameras had been removed. The monitors were gone. But one fact remained clear. Daniel Hart knew the mall better than anyone. And now he knew the police were searching for him. Somewhere in the city, the man who had spent 4 years living beneath the lives of strangers had disappeared into the crowd once again. Weeks passed after Daniel Hart's name was released to the public. But the city slowly returned to its normal rhythm. At first, the story dominated headlines. News channels replayed security footage of the man in the gray hoodie walking quietly through crowded hallways. Social media filled with theories and speculation. People who had visited Riverside Mall wondered if they had unknowingly walked past him. Employees whispered to each other during breaks, glancing nervously toward the service corridors. But time has a way of softening fear. As days turned into weeks, the excitement faded. Other news replaced the story. Crowds returned to the mall. Music played through the speakers again. Children laughed near the arcade. The glass doors opened and closed thousands of times each day, just as they always had. On the surface, everything looked normal. But the security team knew the building felt different now. Every guard on the night shift had heard the story. Every cleaner knew about the tunnels. Even after the underground apartment was emptied and sealed, the idea of someone living unseen beneath the building stayed in everyone's mind. Imran still worked the night shift. He walked the same patrol routes, but his routine had changed. He listened more carefully. He paused more often. The silence of the mall at night felt heavier than before, as if the building itself had secrets it wasn't ready to give up. The tunnels had been sealed with reinforced metal doors. Extra cameras were installed. Motion sensors were placed in service corridors. The mall management wanted to make sure nothing like this could ever happen again. Yet something still felt unfinished. Daniel Hart was still missing. One quiet Tuesday night, nearly 6 weeks after the investigation began, Imran started his patrol as usual. The mall closed at 10 p.m., and by midnight the building had settled into its familiar stillness. The hum of air conditioning echoed softly through the empty corridors. The lights dimmed, casting long shadows along the polished floors. Imran walked past the food court, then toward the cinema hallway. Everything looked calm. Everything looked safe. He reminded himself that the tunnels were sealed. The cameras were active. The building had never been more secure. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching. At 1:40 a.m., he reached the lost and found office. It was a small room near the security station where forgotten bags, phones, and wallets were stored until their owners returned. The door was closed, but the light inside was on. Imran frowned. The lost and found office was never used during the night shift. He walked closer and gently pushed the door open. The room was empty. Nothing looked disturbed. Shelves lined the walls, filled with labeled boxes and plastic containers. A desk stood in the center of the room. On the desk sat a plain white envelope. Imran felt a chill run through his chest. He was certain the desk had been empty earlier in his shift. He stepped inside slowly, scanning the room. No windows were open. No cabinets were disturbed. The hallway outside had security cameras covering every angle. Someone had placed the envelope there without being seen. Imran called his supervisor immediately. Within minutes, the night security team gathered in the room. Police were contacted and arrived shortly after. The envelope remained untouched until the officers put on gloves and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was neat and familiar. It matched the notebook found in the underground apartment. The room fell silent as one officer began reading the letter aloud. The message was simple. Daniel wrote that he never intended to harm anyone. He apologized for the fear he had caused and explained that he never thought anyone would notice his presence beneath the mall. He described the underground space as the only place where he felt safe after losing everything that once gave his life meaning. He wrote about losing his job during the renovation project, about struggling to pay rent, about slowly drifting away from friends and family because he felt ashamed of his situation. He explained how the mall became the last place where he felt connected to the world. The letter described how he would sit quietly and watch people walk past store windows, laughing and talking. Families celebrating birthdays in the food court. Couples meeting for the first time. Children running toward the toy store with excitement. He wrote that he never felt like he belonged among them anymore. But beneath the mall, he could watch life continue without being part of it. He wrote that he learned the rhythms of the building. The quiet hours. The busy weekends. The holiday rush. He described how the sounds of footsteps above him made him feel less alone. The officer reading the letter paused for a moment before continuing. The final lines explained that he left when the police discovered the tunnels because he knew his hidden life was over. He wrote that he did not want to be found, because returning to the world above felt impossible after living in silence for so long. At the bottom of the page was a final sentence. You never notice how easy it is to disappear until someone is living right beneath your feet. The room remained silent long after the letter was finished. Police immediately reviewed the security footage from the night. They searched every camera angle leading to the lost and found office. They checked every hallway, every entrance, every exit. No one appeared. No figure in a gray hoodie. No suspicious movement. No open doors. It was as if the envelope had appeared on the desk by itself. The discovery reignited the search for Daniel Hart. Officers returned to the tunnels once more, even though they had already been sealed. Every corridor was opened and inspected again. Every storage room was searched. They found nothing. No footprints. No new supplies. No signs of recent activity. Daniel Hart had vanished completely. Weeks turned into months, and eventually the case grew quiet again. The city moved on. The mall continued to welcome thousands of visitors each day. Shoppers walked through bright hallways without thinking about the hidden world that once existed beneath their feet. But the story never truly disappeared. Security guards still shared quiet stories during night shifts. Some claimed they heard faint echoes in the service corridors. Others said they occasionally smelled something damp and sour in the air late at night. Management dismissed the reports as imagination. Still, the guards listened carefully when the building became silent. Imran continued his nightly patrols for another year. He never saw Daniel Hart. He never found another letter. But sometimes, while walking through the quiet hallways after midnight, he would stop and stand perfectly still and listen. Because once you learn that someone lived beneath your feet for 4 years, the silence never feels the same again.